The freezing mud seeps completely through your clothes before you even open your eyes. The air is unimaginably thick, choking your lungs with the rancid stench of burning wood, rotting cabbage, and unwashed bodies. You push yourself off the jagged cobblestones, your ears ringing with the frantic clatter of a wooden cart and the wailing of a terrified crowd. You have no idea how you got here, but the grim reality is undeniable. You are in 1347 Europe. A blinding holographic timer suddenly flashes across your vision, hovering perfectly in your field of view no matter where you turn. 23 hours, 59 minutes, and counting down. You realize with sickening, overwhelming clarity that you have exactly 1 day to reach an extraction point located 20 miles outside the fortified city walls. But you are standing at ground zero of the deadliest pandemic in human history. The bubonic plague has just hit this bustling medieval port, and the panic is already spreading faster than the bacteria. You have absolutely no localized immune system to fight off the microscopic killers carried by the infected fleas, scurrying in the gutters right next to your hands. You have no money, no social standing, and no way to speak the harsh, guttural Middle English dialect of the desperate locals swarming around you. To their deeply superstitious minds, your strange clothes and unblemished skin make you a prime suspect for witchcraft or worse, the direct cause of God's terrible wrath. If you stay in this city, you will either die in agony from the Black Death, be tortured and murdered by a panicked mob looking for a scapegoat, or miss your only chance to return to your own timeline. You cannot hesitate. You must move. Now. You keep your head firmly down, stepping carefully to avoid the deep, open trenches of human waste running down the center of the narrow, winding street. Your modern running shoes give you an incredible life-saving advantage on the slick, uneven stones, but they are a massive liability if anyone looks too closely. Your first overriding priority is camouflage. You duck into a dark, suffocating alleyway and quickly strip a rough-spun wool cloak from a wooden drying line, wrapping it tightly around your shivering shoulders. The fabric scratches violently against your skin and smells powerfully of damp earth and sweat, but it successfully covers your synthetic fabrics and strange stitching. You step back out into the main thoroughfare, forcing yourself to match the frantic, hurried pace of the locals to avoid drawing any attention. The city gates are your only viable way out into the countryside, but as you approach the towering stone archway, you see a heavily armed line of guards crossing their iron-tipped pikes. They aren't letting anyone out. A crude, brutal quarantine is being strictly enforced, designed entirely to trap the lethal infection inside the walls. A desperate, weeping crowd shoves violently against the heavy wooden barricades, offering whatever meager copper coins they have and begging the unyielding guards for mercy. You frantically weigh your extremely limited options. You could try to bribe a guard, but your modern currency is completely useless paper here. You could try to fight your way through the choke point, but the guards are heavily armored and highly aggressive, ready to kill at the slightest provocation to maintain order. If you get arrested, you will be thrown into a crowded, flea-infested underground dungeon where a horrific death from infection is an absolute certainty. As you try to back away from the crushing weight of the panicked bodies, someone directly beside you violently, wetly coughs. A fine mist of bloody sputum lightly coats the shoulder of your stolen cloak. It's the pneumonic variant of the plague, the far deadlier airborne killer that bypasses the lymph nodes and destroys the lungs in mere hours. Pure, unadulterated adrenaline floods your system like ice water. You aggressively wipe your cloak, realizing your exposure risk just skyrocketed exponentially. The holographic timer in your vision rapidly drops to 22 hours. You need an alternate route out of this infected trap immediately. You remember reading historical accounts about the intricate network of smuggling tunnels and drainage sewers built beneath major medieval cities. It's a massive, terrifying gamble. The sewers are a concentrated breeding ground for rats, the exact primary carriers of the disease you are desperately trying to avoid. But the impenetrable wall of guards leaves you no other choice. You turn away from the mob and begin desperately searching the darker, neglected corners of the city walls. The timer ticks down to an agonizing 18 hours by the time you finally locate a rusted iron grate partially hidden behind a towering mountain of decaying refuse. It covers a dark, foul-smelling drainage tunnel that leads directly under the city's thick perimeter wall. You wrap your hands carefully in the thick edges of your cloak and pull backward with all your remaining strength. The ancient metal groans loudly and finally gives way, snapping a rusted hinge with a sharp crack. You squeeze your body through the narrow, jagged gap, instantly submerged in pitch-black freezing water that reaches past your knees. The smell is utterly unimaginable, a dense, concentrated vapor of human waste, rotting meat, and stagnation that forces you to gag violently into your arm. You wade blindly forward through the suffocating darkness, keeping one hand flat against the slimy, freezing stone wall for guidance. You can clearly hear the horrific echoing squeaks of hundreds of rats scurrying along the narrow stone ledges just inches from your face. Every single splash you make sends them into a frantic, splashing frenzy. You know perfectly well that these black rats carry the infected fleas, and being trapped in this enclosed space is a terrifying game of microscopic Russian roulette. One bite in the dark, and you are entirely doomed. Suddenly, a faint, flickering orange light appears ahead. As you round a sharp curve in the tunnel, you freeze dead in your tracks. Three men dressed in filthy, soaking rags are huddled tightly around a small, smoky torch. They are professional smugglers, armed with long, crude iron daggers, and they are blocking the only path forward to freedom. They spot you instantly. One of them shouts in a harsh, demanding, unrecognizable tone, brandishing his rusted blade aggressively. He steps closer, the flickering torchlight illuminating the dark, swollen black buboes bursting violently on the side of his neck. He is heavily infected, delirious with a raging plague fever, and utterly desperate. Your modern logic crashes violently against medieval reality. You cannot reason with or intimidate a dying man who has absolutely nothing left to lose. If he manages to cut you even slightly, the open wound will inevitably become severely infected with the filthy sewer water, effectively signing your death warrant, even if you make it back to your own time. The timer in your vision blurs as it reads exactly 15 hours. You have to make a genuinely impossible choice right now. You can try to fight three armed, unpredictable men in waist-deep water in the dark, or you can retreat back into the highly infected city above and completely fail your escape. The infected leader lunges at you, his dagger slicing wildly through the damp air. You react entirely on raw survival instinct, using your superior balance and modern footwear to pivot sharply in the muck. You grab his extended rail-thin arm and shove his fever-weakened body incredibly hard into the stone wall. He collapses heavily into the foul water, his torch hissing violently as it goes completely out, plunging the entire tunnel into absolute, terrifying darkness. Completely blinded and utterly panicked, the remaining two smugglers swing their heavy blades wildly in the pitch-black void, their screams echoing off the stone. You dive without hesitation beneath the freezing, contaminated water, holding your breath desperately as their heavy, splashing footsteps charge right past you. Your lungs burn fiercely with a sudden, desperate need for oxygen, but you force your body to stay submerged, crawling frantically forward against the slimy, jagged bottom of the tunnel. You finally break the surface, gasping violently for air, the metallic taste of raw sewage clinging to your lips, and scramble wildly toward the faint gray moonlight filtering from the tunnel's exit. You tear violently through the heavy, rusted iron bars at the end of the drain and collapse entirely onto the damp, freezing grass of the open countryside. You made it outside the walls, but you are completely soaked in contaminated water, freezing to the bone and physically exhausted. The timer flashes urgently in your vision, exactly 2 hours remaining, and the extraction point is still 5 miles away across open, muddy fields. You force your screaming muscles to move, breaking into a grueling, hypothermic sprint. The wind bites through your wet clothes like shattered glass. You cannot stop. You run until your vision heavily blurs, until your chest feels like it is physically caving in, pushing yourself toward a glowing, impossible distortion, humming violently in the center of a dense forest. With merely seconds left on the digital clock, you throw your exhausted body entirely into the blinding light. You slam incredibly hard onto the sterile, perfectly white floor of a modern, brightly lit decontamination chamber. The heavy steel doors seal shut instantly behind you with a loud hiss, and a massive flood of harsh chemical spray immediately strips the medieval filth and potential pathogens from your body. You successfully survived the 24-hour countdown, but the psychological terror of what you just witnessed will never wash off. You stood exactly at the epicenter of a horrific plague that wiped out 50 million people, entirely helpless to stop it. It's a haunting, permanent reminder of exactly how fragile our reality truly is, and how entirely dependent we are on the invisible, modern shield of science and medicine. You physically escaped the Black Death, but the terrifying realization of humanity's vulnerability is now permanently trapped in your mind. This scenario powerfully proves that sometimes the most terrifying monsters in all of human history aren't vast armies or cruel empires, but microscopic, silent killers we cannot even see. If you survived this one, hit subscribe, because next week, it gets worse.